Hello, it's been a while and I'm back with another video on Aristotle's Art of Rhetoric. This is going to be the concluding video on the third book, and then we'll be on to the next book, which is just a conclusion of the work of Aristotle, and then we can move on to something else. Frankly, I'm tired of this particular work as it's quite methodical and lacking in opinion. So this video will be on stereotypes. Why would we use stereotypes? And stereotypes is a term that I've used. Aristotle uses the term character, but I think stereotype is an apt term to use because this is what he's doing. He's taking physical circumstances of an individual and then attaching to those circumstances dispositions in their character and calling that, in essence, in its totality, character. Aristotle focuses on age as a dimension to form his character archetypes from. He starts with the young and the old. And why does he look at this? It's for utility. The whole purpose of this is that you need to adapt your speech, your written work, your communications to the audience. And one inescapable fact of your audience is that they will have an average age. The age may be very dispersed, in which case you will need something for everyone, or the age may be concentrated and you need to adapt to the temperament that prevails with the age of the audience and indeed the age of the people in general. So he looks at two types, fortune and age. You can have an old person of good birth and a young person of ignoble birth. Those two are opposites. And you can also have a young person of good birth, an old person of ignoble birth. And in this video we'll be focusing just on the age dimension of those four permutations. We'll focus on the two sets that focus on age only, not considering the fortune of the individual. So starting with youth, what does it mean to be young according to Aristotle? What behaviours come with youth that are worth noting or resonating with or acknowledging or appealing to or being aware of? So the young in the dimension of time think ahead. They're always expecting something. They are optimistic. They think the best is to come. They haven't had experience. They haven't felt time's weight in the same way the elderly have. They haven't been exposed to the stochastic fortune's wheel of human existence and human life. They haven't felt illness. They haven't been betrayed by family. They haven't been on the receiving end of adultery. They haven't been a victim of crime or violence or subject to war or natural disaster. They don't have that mortal fear that comes with experience. They tend to be valuing nobility over utility. Nobility in Aristotle's schematic is the notion of what's good for everyone, past, present, young, old, and so forth. Utility is just what's good for me. Young people are noble. they think about the whole family. Now, this is interesting because our current culture is very lionizing of the elderly. We put the elderly on a pedestal like gods, and we tend to think that the elderly are inherently good, inherently wise, and so forth. And it's no surprise that the elderly are the ones that are disseminating this message. But Aristotle, in his time, it was youth and the young who were the well-intentioned. They were the noble. Young people don't use others, particularly their friends, as means. They don't network or use people as tools. They value their company in and of itself. And that's because they don't really have a lust or love for money, because they haven't felt what it means to not have money. Young people are quick-tempered, irascible, and of all their desires, their weakness is sexual in nature. But when their desires erupt, they quickly settle down, and their desires don't have a systematic thoroughness and meticulousness in their execution that the elderly do with their desires. They're not as Machiavellian. They're not as object orientated. They're more intentional than instrumental in their behavior. Because young people haven't seen how wicked life is and how wicked people can be, they're easily cheated and they're gullible. And this is another weakness of youth that people take advantage of regularly. Young people don't mean harm, they only mean insult. They want to protect their dignity, they want to protect what they believe to be good, but they don't really want to do harm to people. And they pity upon others. They're kind. They don't want others to suffer. And they see because they see the good in people. And if you remember our prior videos, pity comes from a sense of justice and kindness, that we don't believe good people should suffer. We want good people, ourselves notwithstanding, to not suffer. Now the old are the contrary of the young. And Aristotle has some very choice words about the old that may come as a surprise to you, but I think if you think about it carefully and you look around you and you look at the way institutions are managed, particularly ones with distributional consequences between young and old, what he's saying will quickly make sense. Not that everything he says makes sense. So the old are the opposite of the young. What do they have that the young don't? They have experience. They have a biological clock that has ticked for longer. And this experience does not polish them, it tarnishes them. They've suffered, they've been betrayed, they've seen wickedness, they've suffered from accidents, from misfortune, from broken relationships, from the death of ones they've loved, and so forth. Because of this, they have big scars and they don't want to feel that way ever again. Their lives are about preserving stability, about preserving a life free of pain. Old people live in the past. They don't look to the future because the future, in their mind, includes death. And they value life because they can feel the slipperiness of life and they can start to feel its evanescence. And because of that, they desire the things that they don't have, and because they're in a state of superposition between life and death, life in the present, but knowledge of death in the future, or knowledge of its reality, they can desire life while living. And because of this, everything they do is very Darwinian, biological, and utile or useful. It's all about being useful for themselves, achieving what they want to the detriment sometimes of the noble. And because of all the accidents they've been on the receiving end of, often they think probabilistically. They've learned by now to not have certain beliefs. They know that they don't know it all, and they think in probabilistic terms in a range of outcomes, and that means that they think but they never know, and they are not as decisive as young people. Now, the elderly are slaves to greed, according to Aristotle. And this is interesting because we often portray the elderly as wise, as Buddha or Gandalf or Santa Claus or the Father and so forth. But really, Aristotle's mind, the elderly are Saturn. They want to eat their children, and this saturnine impulse is something that the elderly would carry out to its completion. The only thing stopping them is their infirmity, their weakness. And, unlike the stereotype of the elderly being self-controlled, and Aristotle mentions this, it's not that they're self-controlled. It's not that they lack lust, or they lack violence, or anger, or a conquering nature. It's that they're too weak, and their passions are too feeble to do anything about it. So their stillness doesn't reflect self-control, it rather betrays infirmity. So those are very negative, on the whole much more negative than his views on the young. And he says about old people, their insularity even trickles down into their pity. When they pity on others, they don't think about humanity. They don't think about the other person's pain. It's really just a sublimation of the impulse of fear. They're thinking, what if that happens to me? They're not thinking, I feel sorry for that person, or they didn't deserve that, or I'm compassionate. They're thinking in explicit terms, I don't want to experience that. And that fear brings about a cold temperament. In Aristotle's words, the fearful existence of old age is cold. And that is contrary to the heat of youth. To sum it up, Aristotle draws a line between the two, and he finds the golden mean, which he calls prime. Interesting word. Prime is the balance. It's neither rash nor timid, neither gullible nor cynical, neither parsimonious nor prodigal. And regarding anger, where the old person is a coward, the prime is brave, and where the young, regarding desire, is intemperate and goes to excess, the prime individual is temperate and balanced in their desires. And this illustration, I believe, is there to give people a moral template for themselves, but I also think from a rhetorical perspective in helping people make a decision, which is what rhetoric is about, is to create a balance from what you want to display or demonstrate is an excess in a particular topic or in someone's argument or in a state of affairs, and you can use this notion of the prime to point out a solution, a middle way. So that concludes this segment, and again I reiterate the purpose of stereotypes is to tailor your communication to your audience and their beliefs and values and fears and desires, so on. Thank you very much. Look forward to the next one.